Hi everybody. Um, Hope you're keen to be started on this next series of little lessons and exercises. And hopefully they'll be as successful as the previous set, because I really did feel that everyone who participated really focused on those little individual visual problems and worked their way steadily through them, which is what I'm trying to do with these little exercises. So this set of exercises is going to be slightly different in the sense that we're going to focus on color. The previous set we talked about materials. How do we express certain materials? And we focused on form and texture surfaces, and we looked at light and shade and tone and how we blend paints and all the rest of it. And the result was the sense of what you would touch, if you could touch it, how it would feel. This time around, what I'd like to do is think about the color of the objects and how their form and structure changes the color. In other words, if you have something like a crumpled piece of paper or cardboard or whatever, there'll be different angles there, and light will be catching it in different ways. Therefore, the color will change. But what I want to do this time around is to set us the challenge of trying to come close to matching those colors. In other words, we're not so concerned. Well, we're concerned, but it's not just about the surface texture. It is about, making the color as right as we can make it. But here is the big but, and the big challenge for me also, by the way. I would like to attempt to do this using essentially the primary colors of red, yellow, and blue. And the reason for that is it's going to strip right back all of our options. We don't have a set of paints next to us. We've three paints essentially, plus white, by the way, in the case of oils or acrylics. I'll allow you the white there, and I'm going to see if we can attempt to get a more natural color established when we're looking at things. In other words, when we're looking at such and such, what color is that? Can we get somewhere near that? We're making the effort, and that is the exercise, by the way. It's not about, oh, I've matched the color exactly, therefore that's successful, or it's not quite there, therefore that's a failure. What I'm trying to do is to make us have to work and think about how we move from one thing to another, how we change color with our paints from A to B to get it closer to what it is in the object we see. That's the process that I want to achieve. The product at the end, I hope will be good, of course, but we're not going to get concerned about, there's not just a binary good or bad, fail or success thing. It's about, what can I do with three colors? How close can we get to these objects that I'm going to give you to look at? Now, on a technical level, there's a little problem, there's an issue we have to be aware of, that we're working online here. Yeah, I'm making videos, you're seeing them on your computer screens or your laptops or whatever, and your screens will be different to mine. The color resolution might be different, and so on. So there will be differences perhaps, but essentially, if you work to the colors you have in the pictures that I send you and try to match those on your terms, and when you send me those back side by side, in other words, there's the photograph you were working from, there's the result of your color mixing and so on, they'll be equal in a sense, because they've been taken with the same camera side by side, ideally, if you can, and we can still make judgment or make assessments of how close you feel you've got. But as I said before, the more important thing is that you're going to be forced to find ways with a very limited colors, and therefore we have to get right down to some of the basics again of color mixing and how color behaves. So this is, I think, at least as challenging as the last series, if not more. But I think it could be also one of the most beneficial things you do. And I would ask you, be patient with yourselves. Try to enjoy the discovery of what happens when we're mixing these things, and do your very best. But the main thing, as I say, is learning to think when we paint. This is a great opportunity in lockdown to be on our own, if you like. And then when we're on our own, we can get time to think about what we do. And I would urge you to do that. So enjoy this. We'll get started now, and good luck with everything. Okay, folks, what I want to do here, or attempt to do here, is just go through the basics of matching a colour. Okay, and it can feel difficult at the start, but once you do it a couple of times, it becomes fairly automatic, really. Keep in mind, there are 2 or 3 things to keep in mind. I have a colour wheel here just to illustrate. As we know, we have a colour wheel, which is the colours of the spectrum arranged in this way. We'll not go into the science of it at the moment, but you can see that you have a side there which generally is warm colours, yellow, orange, and so on, and cooler colours which would be violet, blues, greens. So colour has temperature, so we can adjust the temperature of a colour. So in other words, if we take that yellow and we add a little bit of red, it will become what we call a yellow-orange. In other words, it goes a little more orangey. Likewise, if we take green, add a little blue, it becomes a blue-green. It moves around the cooler section there, moves this way, gets warmer, and so on. So we can adjust. That's one thing we can adjust. We can change the temperature of a colour. Second and most obvious thing, I suppose, is we can change the brightness of a colour. So we can simply add white to the colour to make it brighter. We can adjust the value, as it's called. Okay. The third element is what's called saturation. Okay, and this is the one that is quite important in many respects, because when we look at the world, most of the colours we see in everyday life are all a bit desaturated. They're not as pure as this. We rarely see the world like this. So saturation is really where the colour is drained from another colour. In other words, yellow becomes a grey colour. And you can do this in 2 ways. You can add black or grey to the colour, which will drain the colour out. But you can also add the colours complementary. In other words, if it was yellow and we go straight across that wheel, the colour we see is violet or purple. So if we add small amounts of purple into the yellow, it will drain the colour away. Likewise, if we take orange and we add a bit of blue, which is on the other side, into the orange, we will drain the colour out. It becomes less pure. The pigment becomes grey, basically grayer. And that's the third element. So you have the brightness or value, you have a temperature, and you have saturation. You can play with these 3 things until you achieve a certain colour. And I always liken it to the old colour TV sets when they first come out. If you remember, they had either sliders or knobs, and you had brightness, you had contrast as well, but you had brightness, you had saturation, and you had colour, and you had some 3 wee dots, and you would turn the colour up brighter. And that was saturation, really. So this is what we're trying to do here in these exercises. So this is why I'm kind of lingering, and this is quite important. There's an example of desaturation, by the way. That's what happens if we were to drain the colour out of a colour. So there's a bright yellow, and as it drains away, it becomes this duller, greenish, eventually grey colour. So that is as an example of saturation I had there. So given that, or keeping that in mind, what I want to do here is try a little exercise. So this colour is the colour that I would like to achieve. I've painted a long strip of it. I just kind of mixed any colour I could find and stirred them in to make the muckiest colour I could get. And this is what I got. I could sort of ran with that. Now on my left hand side I have the three primary colours, blue, yellow, red and white down here. So we have three primaries and a white. And this series of exercises that we're going to do, the series of lessons if you like, is to make us focus on how we can practice seeing something and matching it, or at least getting close. Don't be too harsh, because I know I'm not going to be too harsh. The process is what's important. The process of being able to realize that you very rarely see, oh, there's a green leaf, and squeeze green out of your greenest tube of paints and put it on and accept that it's not. Very often what we think is green is very, very, very subtle, and we just say, oh, it's green because it's a tree. So what I want you to do is really look at the color you see. So here's how we can do that. We have a target. This will be known as our target color that we want to strike. We want to match this if we can. The first thing we do is look at that color and ask ourselves, where would we place that color? If we had a wheel like this, what's the closest color we think, in our opinion, that could come to amongst these colors here? Okay, so even if you were to use the primaries, which is red, yellow and blue, and the secondaries, which is orange, green and violet, and just ignore the in-between ones for now. So obviously if I was to look at this and hold that close to that color, I could argue that yellow is probably in there, or equally orange. It's somewhere in between, to be honest. So you can see that, yellow or orange. And the thing is, it's not critical that one or other is chosen. You're just trying to get somewhere in the ballpark, because you're eventually going to move it around until you fit it into the right kind of color category. So I'm going to go with orange. Okay, I'm just going to go with orange this time. So I'm going to start with orange. So to make orange, of course, it's yellow and red. And I'm using lemon yellow here, by the way. And this is crimson. And this is ultramarine blue. I'm putting a tiny bit of crimson in, because orange appears very quickly. Color becomes orange very, very quickly. You can see that. You don't need much red into yellow to make an orange. So I've got an orange here, really quite a deep orange. But that's okay, So what I'm going to do is take my color and place that there beside that. I'm using this gray. I'm actually using the back of a mirror, which is this nice gray tone, which I find is helping look at the colors without the glare of white. But there is a patch of that orange, and you can see it's obviously not correct, but it's a start. The first question I want to ask myself is that color, does it need to be lighter? What about the value, the brightness? And if I half close my eyes, this is the way you can do this, and if you can see the differentiation between the two better if you half close your eyes, I think that the color could be slightly lighter, but only slightly. So let's put a tiny bit of white. I don't know if you can see that in that camera. There's a tiny tip of white into this. Again, don't get overly anxious if you don't match these exactly, but there is our slightly lighter version of that color. Okay, still quite rich, but it's lighter. So the brightness, I think I'm kind of happy with. The next question is, think about the temperature of that color, the color that we've just made. So if I was looking at that on my wheel, and if someone said, you've got to move that over that way, which way would you go? So if I'm in amongst the oranges, which way would it go? And I think I'm going towards the yellow-green side, It's a more of a greeny tone, a cooler tone than that. So what I'll do is I'll cool that down with a tiny little bit of blue in there. So we'll add blue. However, remember that if I was to take a lump of blue like that and stick it in there to my mix, it's going to get darker, because obviously that blue there is really dark. That has just been lightened. So what I need to do
is make sure that I make a blue which is something similar in brightness to that. So in other words, take a blue, add a little bit of white to it. And again, it's not totally critical at this stage, because some people get very disheartened and go, it's not exactly the brightness. But if you can get closer to the brightness rather than sticking the dark color in, that's the main thing. It makes life easier when the mixing happens. So there's a tiny little bit. So we're only adding bits at a time, because otherwise it's quite easy to overdo things. And I can see there how that's changing it. Okay, we're now moving it. We've cooled it down. And let's see where we are. Look at that. I'm really quite fairly happy with that. I'm getting very, very close. And I'm trying to think, well, it's so close, but perhaps what it is now, I think I've got in the color range. But here's the thing, that color looks slightly richer, pure. That looks a bit gray or kind of mucky. So maybe it's about saturation. Maybe I need to desaturate the color, drain a wee bit of the color out. If I was to go back to my wheel here, just grab my wheel here. And so now what we've got is this more greeny tones. Okay, so we've brought our orange slowly over to a more greenish orange, if that makes any sense. And so that we're dealing with that greenish orange, it's very difficult to find that color there, but you're trying to work around and see, well, where roughly is it? If we were, so if you look at that yellow green, because if you go to the green there, it's very bluish green, so let's go with that. So if we look around that type of yellow green and go right across, the color we have is red violet. In other words, a reddish purple. Okay, so what I'm going to do is try to do that. So I'm going to make a little bit of red there, a little bit of blue, but as I say, it's a reddish, so we want red to dominate. So there's more red and blue there, and of course again we want to bring this up to the brightness of our mix. So again, a little bit of white, and what we've got is a pinky color, but it's just about violet. It's just got a wee tint of violet, so I'm gonna risk that. Okay, but again, tiny amount. It's hard to know. I've got the camera mounted above me here, whether you're seeing that or not, but I hope you are. You can see how little that I'm going to add into that mix. You can see there, and stirring that around here. Now I'm going to put a wee bit there. Look, I hope you see the difference in that. Do you see that? Maybe a little more, but I'm risk here of getting overly zealous, but I'm going to mix a little bit more in, and put that down. It's not on like that, but look, we're right in there, we're as close as we could ever be. You might even argue that it might even be lighter. We might even argue that it needs a little bit of white back. So we can keep changing, adjusting, but we know what we're adjusting. That's the thing. We're not guessing. We're saying it needs to be lighter, add white. It needs to be desaturated, add a bit of complementary. It needs to be warmer, add a bit of red or blue, whatever. So there's a lighter version. I think I've gone a wee bit too light there, but here I think I'm probably close right in there, So what I hope that this proves to you is that there is a method to achieving the colors that you see. Don't feel when you're doing these exercises that you've got to necessarily go through a very scientific kind of process for every little exercise you do. All I would like you to remember is that when you look at something, ask yourself, let's say it's a lemon or something like that, and you're looking at the shadow in the lemon, and you're thinking, what color, how does the color change from the light to the dark? Well, look at it and you say, well, it's lighter on one side, darker on the other side. So there's the value thing. It might be colder on one side and the shady side, and warmer, brighter, like a yellow on the other side. And it might be more desaturated. So you maybe put a little purple in to the yellow to drain that out. And so use those three things. Don't necessarily do mean, I went into fine detail in a sense that I went round here and went to yellow, green and red. Stick to the primaries and maybe secondaries, in other words, if you have a colour that's in the yellow range, it's not maybe smack on yellow, run with yellow and add purple to it and a little bit of purple. You will probably get pretty close anyway. And the reason I'm saying that is just to keep your options, your choices simple. If you're worried about having to look at this wheel every time you mix the next bit of color, you might only feel frustrated. At this point, just say, well, if I've got a yellowy color, I'll add purple to desaturate it. If I've got an orangey color, it'll be blue. If I've got a reddish color, I'll go with green. So it doesn't have to be smack on. I will kind of pursue this during the exercises, and each exercise I'll be telling you what I'm doing, what I'm adding to get that particular color and so on. But we'll all have different visions of it, literally, because I'm standing here now, you're seeing this on a screen, your video screen might have different resolution, and you might be saying, Sam says that orange, but I'm not seeing orange, I'm seeing red. Remember that it's there's all that. But at the end of the day, hopefully what you're seeing is some sort of a matching happening here. So hopefully that's of use to you in the coming weeks.